Aramis returned, laughing. One hat on his head, and the other in his hand, and he and his companion resumed their walk toward the convent. "Good," said D'Artagnan, rising and brushing his knees. "Now I have thee, thou art a Frondeur and the lover of Madame de Longueville." Chapter X. Monsieur Porthos du Vallon de Brachou de Pierrefonds. Thanks to what Aramis had told him, D'Artagnan, who knew already that Porthos called himself Du Vallon, was now aware that he styled himself, from his estate, De Brachou, and that he was, on account of this estate, engaged in a lawsuit with the Bishop of Noyon. It was, then, in the neighborhood of Noyon that he must seek that estate. His itinerary was promptly determined. He would go to Dammartin, from which place two roads diverge, one toward Soissons, the other toward Compiègne. There he would inquire concerning the Brachou estate and go to the right or to the left according to the information obtained. Planchet, who was still a little concerned for his safety after his recent escapade, declared that he would follow D'Artagnan even to the end of the world, either by the road to the right or by that to the left, only he begged his former master to set out in the evening. For greater security to himself, D'Artagnan suggested that he should send word to his wife, so that she might not be anxious about him. But Planchet replied with much sagacity that he was very sure his wife would not die of anxiety through not knowing where he was, while he, Planchet, remembering her incontinence of tongue, would die of anxiety if she did know. This reasoning seemed to D'Artagnan so satisfactory that he no further insisted, and about 8 o'clock in the evening, the time when the vapours of night begin to thicken in the streets, he left the Hôtel de la Chevrette, and followed by Planchet set forth from the capital by way of the St. Denis Gate. At midnight the two travellers were at Dammartin, but it was then too late to make inquiries. The host of the Cygne de la Croix had gone to bed. The next morning D'Artagnan summoned the host, one of those sly Normans who say neither yes nor no and fear to commit themselves by giving a direct answer. D'Artagnan, however, gathered from his equivocal replies that the road to the right was the one he ought to take, and on that uncertain information he resumed his journey. At 9 in the morning he reached Nantes and stopped for breakfast. His host here was a good fellow from Picardy, who gave him all the information he needed. The Brachou estate was a few leagues from Villers-Cotterets. D'Artagnan was acquainted with Villers-Cotterets, having gone thither with the court on several occasions, for at that time Villers-Cotterets was a royal residence. He therefore shaped his course toward that place and dismounted at the Dauphin door. There he ascertained that the Brachou estate was 4 leagues distant, but that Porthos was not at Brachou. Porthos had, in fact, been involved in a dispute with the Bishop of Noyon in regard to the Pierrefonds property, which adjoined his own, and weary at length of a legal controversy which was beyond his comprehension, he put an end to it by purchasing Pierrefonds and added that name to his others. He now called himself Du Vallon de Brachou de Pierrefonds, and resided on his new estate. The travellers were therefore obliged to stay at the hotel until the next day. The horses had done 10 leagues that day and needed rest. It is true they might have taken others, but there was a great forest to pass through, and Planchet, as we have seen, had no liking for forests after dark. There was another thing that Planchet had no liking for, and that was starting on a journey with a hungry stomach. Accordingly, D'Artagnan, on awaking, found his breakfast waiting for him. It need not be said that Planchet, in resuming his former functions, resumed also his former humility, and was not ashamed to make his breakfast on what was left by D'Artagnan. It was nearly 8 o'clock when they set out again. Their course was clearly defined. They were to follow the road toward Compiègne, and on emerging from the forest turn to the right. The morning was beautiful, and in this early springtime the birds sang on the trees and the sunbeams shone through the misty glades like curtains of golden gauze. In other parts of the forest the light could scarcely penetrate through the foliage, and the stems of two old oak trees, the refuge of the squirrel, startled by the travellers, were in deep shadow. There came up from all nature in the dawn of day a perfume of herbs, flowers, and leaves, which delighted the heart. D'Artagnan, sick of the closeness of Paris, thought that when a man had three names of his different estates joined one to another, he ought to be very happy in such a paradise. Then he shook his head, saying, "If I were Porthos and D'Artagnan came to make me such a proposition as I am going to make to him, I know what I should say to it. As to Planchet, he thought of little or nothing, but was happy as a hunting hound in his old master's company." At the extremity of the wood D'Artagnan perceived the road that had been described to him, and at the end of the road he saw the towers of an immense feudal castle. "Oh, oh," he said, "I fancied this castle belonged to the ancient branch of Orleans. Can Porthos have negotiated for it with the Duc de Longueville?" "Faith," exclaimed Planchet, "here's land in good condition. If it belongs to Monsieur Porthos, I wish him joy." "Zounds!" cried D'Artagnan, "don't call him Porthos, nor even Vallon call him De Brechoux or De Pierrefonds. Thou wilt knell out damnation to my mission otherwise." As he approached the castle which had first attracted his eye, D'Artagnan was convinced that it could not be there that his friend dwelt. The towers, though solid and as if built yesterday, were open and broken. One might have fancied that some giant had cleaved them with blows from a hatchet.